Time now is 7:48. We're going to talk about Paul Newman now, Hollywood icon, of course, who appeared on the face to have it all. The looks, the awards, loving family. He even built a food empire with his own pasta sauce and salad dressing.
In fact, he was dogged by anxiety, insecurity and painful memories, which he laid bare in a half-finished memoir. And
that story has now been finally published with the help of his daughter, Melissa. We'll be speaking to her in just a moment. Here, though, first, a reminder of Dad's remarkable life.
Hombre means man, and Paul Newman is hombre.
I'm not looking to get myself killed, so pay attention.
Well, Melissa Newman joins us now. I'm sure you can probably see the family resemblance. Wonderful to have you here with us. And you were just commenting on some of the pictures that you saw there. Does it still kind of give you a little bit of a flutter when you look at pictures like this of your dad's career?
I have to say that going down a rabbit hole every time you, if you type my parents' name into the Google machine, which says a lot about how I feel about technology. It's a rabbit hole. You could be there for 6 hours. I see every single time I do it, I see photographs I've never seen before. It's extraordinary, both my parents. They're so beautiful, you know.
Is it a difficult thing, Melissa? Because we all have we from the outside have these images of your father. And you know him as a dad. You know, you don't know him as a Hollywood movie star. Is it difficult having us kind of inspecting your life in a way when we don't know anything?
Well, it's inspecting his life, which is interesting. And I was thinking about this, that, you know, I'm being asked to be an authority on my parents. And I thought, well, who is an authority on their parents, really? You know, when people say, what was it like? What was your father like? I always say, well, what was your father like? You know, they were my parents. I'm an authority on being their child, you know. There are movies of theirs that I haven't seen.
Deliberately, or just you haven't got around to it because the catalogue
there are a lot.
Is so,
yeah, I
so
mean, I
broad.
literally have movies in my future that I'm excited to see, but also somewhat melancholy. That's why it's a little sad at this point to sit down and watch them.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
The whole point about the book, though, is that it will reveal a side to him that people will not know, and it's quite raw in that respect, isn't it?
Yes, it is. You know, I always say that there are so many books in these transcripts. There are so many transcripts. And you could write 12 books and a play and you know, you could do all sorts of things.
He was collating the experiences of other people in his life about him and his life and his works. And then I think began putting down his own stories, but orally about his life and experiences. Is that right?
Yeah, it's important to remember that this is an oral document. And the interviewer, Stewart Stern, was an incredibly close friend of the family. My middle name is Stuart. My son's middle name is Stuart. He became ordained as a minister so he could marry my husband and I. So he was a wonderful, magical person. Stewart Stern is someone worth looking up. And he was close to the family. And I think it's interesting that I was thinking about the fact that in the book you'll find that my father's mother objectified him because he was beautiful. And in a way, I think Stuart objectified him and imbued him with all this intellectual and artistic prowess that my father didn't feel he had. And so you have Stuart asking these very probing questions and my dad answering, and sometimes sounding a bit punchy in his answers. And I could always tell when he was getting annoyed, because in the transcripts you'll see he'll say, "Stuart, I didn't feel any of those things." But Stuart was really good at digging. So since Stuart was sort of removed from that, it's kind of interesting to think my father wasn't sitting down at a typewriter. He was. If he had written this, it would have been very different. So these are really oral transcripts.
It is nonetheless, and I think you alluded to a moment ago. There are difficult areas, I would imagine. For you said you can only tell the story as a child.
Yeah.
There are difficult areas, aren't there? One being his drinking.
Yes.
Which I certainly, why would we know about that? But it was almost a constant throughout his life, wasn't it? And he saw as very debilitating in some ways. And then also, he was very anxious about his role as a father.
Yes.
And how well he did as a father, which I would imagine seeing your own father writing that down would be difficult.
Well, because I have children, really reading about that isn't such a surprise. I mean, once you have children, you understand how they don't come with instructions, and nobody is deemed, knighted to be a parent. What was the first question you asked was about?
It was about the alcohol. And,
the alcohol.
And, the impact that had on life and family.
Yeah, I would say what was kind of frustrating was that he was incredibly high functioning. He was also a man who was always known to be on time, ready, knew his lines. That's why everybody loved to work with him. And so that really made it difficult to call him out. And it made him distant. He became better and better. So by the time we bought the house, I live in the house I lived in when I was a child. They bought it in 1961, the year I was born.
So the house you grew up in?
The house I grew up in. I feel like a docent. We have the best family photos. Same furniture, different slipcovers. But so the last 12 years were really spent with babies and barbecues. They moved to my grandmother's house across the river with a footbridge and a river, and we had children running back and forth in barbecues. And really by the time he got to the point of being a grandparent, he evolved. And after this was, my little sister Clea points out that this was really a moment in time when and I think all this introspection was tricky.
Can I ask you about the impact Paul Newman had on a room? I once interviewed Robert Redford many years ago, 2013 I think it was, and that was the first time I'd witnessed that, Robert Redford, and then you're going to meet him, and then there he is.
Yeah.
You must have seen that firsthand a million times, and what was that like?
Well, as a family member, I think this is also interesting because the producer, Emily Wachtel, who produced both the documentary that's out about them and also really made this book happen and she found the transcripts. I knew the transcripts were up in a cabinet, some of them, but by the time she's the one who got the key and actually got them out and started reading them and decided that it should be a book. You have to remind me what the question was. It's
the impact Paul Newman had when he walking
into a room. So she grew up with our family as well, and is also an amazing producer. So she understood why these transcripts were important to put out into the world. Him walking into a room, sitting at a table with him when I was a child. I mean, there were times we were at hotels, you couldn't leave the hotel, the paparazzi. It's really, I think when you just want to be an actor, I think when you want to be a star, maybe it's different, but when you really just want to be an actor, that's doubly annoying. So, we'd be sitting at dinner and, mostly women would come up to my mother and say, "Can I kiss him?" And I give my mom credit for not slugging somebody.
Well, actually, that's one thing that is worth talking
weird.
about as well, because one of the other sort of narratives of the book is that the enduring love between your parents. And your mum is still around, I know, but that must be something that's actually very special and uplifting to remember and think about. Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that you find out in the book is how complicated it was, and I think that people were so interested in this, the fairy tale narrative of the perfect marriage in Hollywood for 50 years.
You know, and anybody just who's married needs to just think about that for half a second and knows that there's no way that could be true. And, you know, doubly complicated because of fame and you know, so we sort of felt like people clung to this fairy tale, even though the other information was really out there. But they clung to the fairy tale, but you know, as people started to forget about them, which is why we engaged in making these projects, we decided that maybe it made more sense, if they're going to disappear anyways, to bring them back in a more manner which we think is really more relevant to people, to see that, you know, that gloss is just a gloss. But the thing I find most fascinating about them is this inexorability of their, you know, I always say that I really felt like she was the only one he wanted in the room at the end. You know, that lasted forever. He found her endlessly fascinating and also loved directing her. Spent his whole life, you know, trying to find projects to direct her and, you know, show the rest of the world how extraordinary she was.
That's an incredible thing for two people to have.
Yeah.
It is a compelling read, and if for anyone who has any interest in films, you know, there's so much detail in there, apart from anything else, just about the work and all that stuff. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So Paul Newman's memoir is called The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man.
Headlines.